Have you ever wondered how executive compensation works? Well, we're going to talk about that. My name is Tom, and I'm the founder of Vertical Motion, where we help mid-career professionals become executives. If you're interested in learning more, then check out the links down below or subscribe to this channel so you can see more content about what it takes to go from a mid-career professional level, which is, like a manager, 10, 15 years of experience, to a VP or C-suite or beyond. Today, what we're doing is we're talking about executive compensation and how executive compensation is a little bit different than compensation for other employees in the company. In most companies, you have individual contributors, people who actually do the work. Then you have managers, people who manage both the people and the resources of the company. And then you have executives. And the executives, they're there to basically steer the company. They're there to make sure that the systems of employees and managers are all working in the direction that they think is best suited for the company to grow. Executives are at the top of the organization. So executives earn more compensation because they're doing more of the strategic leading of the organization. Employees, the individual contributors, are there to do the work, but they're more easily replaced. Executives are much harder to replace, and that's why they earn more. So compensation for individual contributors tends to be pretty simple, right? You will have a base salary, which is either an hourly wage or it can be an annual salary, an hourly rate of like $20 an hour, or an annual salary of $65,000 as an example. Sometimes individual contributors will also get a bonus, and that will be some percentage of their base pay. That's typically 10 to 20%. As you move to the manager level, you see those salaries start to increase, and the salaries can become well over six figures as a manager. You also see individual bonuses start to increase at the manager level. And so manager bonuses can be 20 to 30% of your base pay, which is, pretty nice. It's not uncommon for a senior manager to be making 130 base with like 25% of their base pay being an annual bonus, which is tied to the performance of the company. If the company has really good revenue and really good profitability, you will get a really nice bonus as well. That's how compensation works at individual contributor and manager levels. At the executive level, it's a little bit different. It depends also very much on how big the corporation is, if it's publicly traded or not, and what industry it's in, what part of the world or what part of the country it's in. There are 5 layers to executive compensation. The first layer is the same as what you find at the rest of the organization, individual contributors and managers. Executives also have a base salary. Base pay for executives can look like something like $250,000 to $300,000 a year. It can go well north of $1 million, and it can be less depending on the organization. But generally speaking, if you have individual contributors such as like engineers in your company and they're making around $130,000 to $150,000 as their base pay, your executives in that kind of company are probably going to be making around $250,000 to $400,000 a year in base pay. And so that base pay is literally what it sounds like. It is the pay on which they live. It's guaranteed to them. That's the paycheck that shows up every 2 weeks. Above base pay, just like the rest of the organization, executives also have bonuses. There are 2 types of bonuses that executives tend to get. The first is tied to revenue generation. So if you are a chief revenue officer, or you're the VP of sales, or VP of marketing, or you are on the revenue generation side of the company, then your bonus compensation is going to be tied very closely to the generation of revenue. And therefore, you're going to have something like a sales incentive plan or a SIP. Sales incentive plans are basically tied to hit a certain target revenue number, and if you hit that revenue number, then you get 100% of your bonus. On the operations side of the company, if you're somebody who's delivering the actual product or the service to customers, you're not tied to revenue as much. You're going to be tied more to profitability. And so on the operations side, you'll get a bonus that's called MBO, or Management by Objectives. And this is where the CEO and the board basically set plans on revenue, EBITDA, book-to-bill ratio, all of these metrics that they care about to make sure that the company is working efficiently and effectively. So if you're VP of operations or you are the VP of customer support, your MBO bonus is going to be tied to more of the profitability of the company than the revenue generation. but both are going to be components of your MBO bonus. This bonus can be equal to your base. It can be somewhere in the 200 to 500K range. The larger the organization and the higher you go, the bigger this bonus gets. It's not uncommon to see executives making, in larger organizations, 200-300K base, but making 800 to $1 million in bonus. Smaller companies, where there's like 150, 200 employees or something like that, or even less than 1,000 employees, in those kinds of companies, the numbers will be smaller, but the bonus will start to be similarly sized to your base. So just keep that in mind. It's like when you get a job as an executive, your base is what you live off of. The bonus is your upside. So those two layers of the executive compensation pyramid basically are the same compensation that you would see kind of throughout the entire company. Most people get a base and they get a bonus. Where things start to change at the executive level is this is where you will start to see the third layer of executive compensation, and that is long-term incentive, or LTI. This is typically in the form of equity. So if you work in a publicly traded company, you will get what are called restricted stock units, or RSUs. You may also get stock options, and there's all kinds of stock plans and equity incentive plans. There's phantom stock. There's all kinds of types of equity. But at the end of the day, what the company is trying to do is give you a piece of the company in terms of shares. And they're doing that so that you are incentivized to increase the value of those shares. And so the work that you're doing should basically benefit you if you are helping benefit the people that are giving you the shares in the first place. The equity grants that you're given as an executive will basically be something that you vest into over time. So they will grant you, say, 100,000 shares in a company that has 30 million shares. And you get those 100,000 shares, but you get them over the period of 4 years. And as you get them, you can exercise them and sell them and then turn that into cash, right? And there's all kinds of tax implications and this and that, but at the end of the day, it's a form of compensation that is tied very closely to the success of the company. You may be doing great at your job, but if everyone else is doing terrible and the company is doing poorly, then you're not going to get as much value out of those shares as if the company was doing fantastic. And so this is a way to incentivize executives to not only do great at what they do, but to find ways to help the company to be greater in general. And so this is why you see executives that are looking out beyond just their silo. They're not just looking at, well, I'm the operations person, so I'm only focusing on how good operations can be. No, your COO and your VP of operations, they're going to be trying to figure out how to help sales. They're going to be trying to figure out how to help customer delivery. They're going to try to figure out how to reduce RMAs. They're going to be doing things that are outside of their scope because they care about the entire organization being successful. And that's because a big piece of their compensation is tied to LTI, or long-term incentives, which is this equity we're talking about. In terms of value, your base pay is a pretty significant chunk, and it's what you kind of like make your mortgage payment on and pay groceries with, right? Bonus is what you use to have nice vacations and buy a nicer car. LTI, this is your long-term investment money. And so this money can get to be very big the higher you go as an executive. It's not uncommon to see someone with a 200-300K base, a 300 to 500K bonus, but multi-million-dollar equity plan if you're a senior executive in a publicly traded organization. At smaller companies, you're talking more like 200K base, 200K bonus, 400K long-term incentive plans. So the numbers vary from organization to organization, but generally speaking, the higher you go, the bigger the organization, the more public the organization, the more your compensation is going to be leaning towards this third layer, the long-term equity layer. So those three things make up the majority of your executive compensation package. You have your base salary, your bonus, which is either MBO, management by objectives, or SIP, sales incentive plan, and then LTI, long-term incentive, which tends to be equity grants. That's the majority of executive compensation. But at the executive level, there are other forms of compensation, and these forms of compensation are there to lure and keep the best executives that are out there. So the next layer above LTI that you'll see is supplemental bonuses and supplemental benefits. You may ask an executive, okay, if you win this particular deal, we will give you a $100,000 bonus for bringing in that customer. Or if you're able to reduce our RMA load to 10% of what it is today, you'll get a $250,000 bonus for doing that. There are bonuses that are tied to specific objectives and goals that are strategically important to the success and the growth of the company. And so executives will sometimes be given a bonus to go and hit a milestone that's super important to the company. And so that would be a supplemental bonus. Yes, it is possible to have multiple bonuses in the same year, and many executives do reap the benefits of doing that. Beyond that, you'll also see supplemental benefits. It's not uncommon to have executives have all of their medical coverage paid for in full. If they need other types of insurances, like life insurance and supplemental insurances, sometimes companies will cover all of that for you. There's other types of benefits as well, such as a company car or guaranteed vacation or all expenses paid vacation, which would be a company retreat down in like Maui or something like that. Think about these as kind of like their benefits that really are there to entice that individual executive to want to stay with the organization. And these tend to get very individual specific. Some people, they want a company car because they live 100 miles from the office and they have to commute in. And so they don't want to put that mileage on their car. They may get a free Uber card where they just Uber to and from work, or maybe if they're flying a lot, any flight over 4 hours is automatic upgrade to business class. Those are benefits that are specifically reserved for executives that have earned them. And then finally, at the very top of the executive compensation pyramid, there's a category called perks. You could kind of argue that some of the benefits that I just talked about really are perks. In a sense, they are. Like a company car might actually be a perk. I think of it as a benefit because it's actually still helping the company accomplish its goals if that executive is in the office more often because they have a car that they're driving that's not wearing down their own personal car. You could kind of argue that's either way. But either way, at the very top of this, the best executives, the ones that the corporation cares very much about keeping because they lead their teams effectively, they are responsible for tremendous growth. They're the ones that everybody looks to and says, wow, I am so glad she is here. She's an amazing leader and we have to figure out how to keep her. Those executives will ultimately unlock this very top level of compensation, which are called perks. I have seen some incredible perks in my career. I once worked for a company that brought in a leadership team. I lived in Georgia. These folks came in from California. They had just sold a company into a public organization, and this private equity firm brought them in to run my company to take us public as well. And this leadership team, my goodness. So they took $240 million and they spent it. It was incredible to watch. The CEO was given a $3.5 million house to live in here in Atlanta. The CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, she didn't want to move to Atlanta. She lived in LA. And so they paid first-class flights Monday out, Thursday back every week for her to fly first class from Los Angeles to Atlanta and then live in this like $1 million apartment while she did the work. The CTO that they brought in, this guy had a sports car delivered in front of the building, in front of all the employees. And we're all just like, this is ridiculous. All this money and we're not seeing any of this, but these executives were getting. So he was given a car and it was delivered to the office because I guess he just wanted to show that off. But it was like, wow, a $3 million house on top of your $3 million base salary, on top of your $3 million bonus, on top of your $10 million equity incentive package. That's pretty nice. So I've seen some interesting perks, golf memberships, an island, like people can get some pretty interesting perks as they move up and they become indispensable. And this is a way to really fight over the cream of the crop. The very top executives that are the very best at what they do, they never have to go and look for a job. People just tap them on the shoulder and say, look, I know he gave you a boat, but what if I give you an island? Will you come work for me then? Perks can get a little wild. And so just keep that in mind. Like, if you become an indispensable executive that is absolutely delivering incredible value to your organization, you're going to see some real interesting perks at the top of the pyramid. So to recap executive compensation, it works similar, but just slightly different than other compensation plans for individual contributors and managers. There is the base, just like everyone else, and then there is bonus, just like everyone else, even though the numbers are bigger and maybe bonus is a little bit bigger than a bonus for lower level employees. And then long-term incentive, this is the equity. This is where executives make most of their money. The majority of their big pay packages come in the form of long-term incentive and equity. Just keep that in mind. That's where you're going to really make your money. This is why you see some people say like, well, I forego my salary. I'm going to make $1 a year. They don't care because they're making millions of dollars on the equity package that they are not giving up. So just keep that in mind as people say like, well, you know, like I'm a man of the people. Like, no, you're not. You're still making $5 million in bonuses, dude. But base, bonus, LTI, and then above that, which is typically not something that you see at the manager or individual contributor level, those would be supplemental bonuses, supplemental benefits, and then perks such as cars being delivered to you. So that's executive compensation in a nutshell. I have a really great tool on the website. You can go find it at vmleader.com/tool. It's an executive compensation planning guide, and it's there to help you understand all of the things that I just talked about, but also kind of plan out your executive compensation goals as you move up in your career. Go check that out. It's at vmleader.com/tool. It's a super helpful tool. I'm always working on it and adding to it. I'd love your feedback if you see something that you wish was in there, or if you have some thoughts on what I've written in there. But hopefully it's a useful tool for you. I hope this video was helpful to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.